What would you do if your HOA president tried to fill your pool with cement in the middle of the night? What if she wasn't just a control freak, but actually running a massive real estate scam? Tessa Robinson thought she was just renovating her pool. She had no idea she was about to uncover a criminal conspiracy. How did an HOA war turn into Cementgate 2.0? Stay tuned to find out. Like and subscribe for more jaw-dropping stories. If you had asked Tessa Robinson a year ago whether she would ever find herself locked in a battle of wills with her homeowners association, she probably would have laughed. She was too busy designing luxury commercial spaces for million-dollar clients to worry about neighborhood politics. But as it turned out, even the most successful architect could find herself at the mercy of an overzealous HOA president with a power complex. It all started with her backyard pool. Tessa had lived in Willow Creek Estates for 6 years. A beautiful, well-manicured neighborhood filled with colonial-style houses, pristine sidewalks, and a level of suburban tranquility that could almost make you forget that some of the residents took community rules a little too seriously. Her house was one of the nicest in the neighborhood, a stunning modern build with clean lines, tall windows, and a backyard oasis that had once been the envy of the block. But by now, the pool, installed back in the early 2000s, was showing its age. The tiles were cracking, the filtration system needed an upgrade, and after a particularly great year at her architecture firm, she decided it was time to give the pool a major facelift. She wasn't reckless. Tessa knew how HOA politics worked, so she made sure to follow every single guideline to the letter. She submitted detailed renovation plans, including material samples, and even a 3D rendering of the project to ensure the changes would blend seamlessly with the neighborhood's aesthetic. Her plan was straightforward: upgrade the pool's design, install an energy-efficient system, and enhance safety features. Nothing outrageous. No wild colors, no oversized structures, just a sleek, modernized version of what was already there. The HOA board reviewed her submission and voted on it. Out of 5 board members, 4 approved it immediately. The only dissenting vote, Linda Crawford. If suburban neighborhoods had villains, Linda was a textbook case. She had recently been elected as the HOA president, and ever since then, the community had started noticing an uptick in micromanaging enforcement of obscure HOA regulations. A woman in her late 50s, Linda had the sharp, calculating demeanor of someone who took personal pride in being in control. She drove a pristine white BMW, dressed like she was always on her way to a country club brunch, and had a signature passive-aggressive smile that could make even the calmest person want to punch a hole through a brick wall. At first, Tessa wasn't too concerned. The vote had already gone through. Majority ruled. What could Linda possibly do? Turns out, a lot. A week after the board's approval, Tessa received a bright yellow notice taped to her door. Violation notice. Your grass exceeds the maximum height limit by 0.5 inches. Please rectify this issue immediately or face a fine. Tessa frowned at the letter. Half an inch? Seriously? She just had her landscaper over a few days ago. Even if her grass had grown, it couldn't have been by that much. She brushed it off, thinking it was a one-time nitpick. 2 days later, another notice arrived. Violation notice. Your mailbox does not meet reflective visibility standards. Please install an HOA-compliant model within 7 days. Reflective visibility standards. Since when had that been a thing? Then, the final straw violation notice. Surveillance equipment visible from the street is strictly prohibited. Remove your security doorbell camera immediately. This one made her see red. The HOA guidelines explicitly allowed security cameras as long as they didn't obstruct public pathways. Her doorbell camera was perfectly legal. At this point, Tessa knew this wasn't about minor rule violations. This was personal. Linda wanted her to know that she wasn't in charge. Tessa wasn't the type to back down. If Linda thought she could bully her into submission, she had picked the wrong woman. Marching across the street to Linda's oversized brick house, Tessa rang the doorbell and folded her arms, waiting. The door swung open, revealing Linda dressed in a tennis outfit, holding a glass of white wine at 10 in the morning. "Tessa," she said sweetly, tilting her head. "What a surprise." Tessa did not return the smile. "Linda, I think we need to talk about these violation notices." Linda sighed theatrically, stepping aside. Come in. Let's be civil, shall we?" Tessa followed her into the house, where everything was immaculately decorated in shades of beige and gold, the kind of house where you just knew no one was allowed to touch anything. On the coffee table sat a thick binder labeled HOA President's Guidebook. Linda sat gracefully on her couch and took a sip of wine. "Now, dear, what seems to be the issue?" "The issue," Tessa said, "is that I've suddenly started getting a bunch of nitpicky violation notices right after my pool renovation was approved." "Coincidence?" Linda set down her glass and folded her hands in her lap, smiling that awful, patronizing smile. "Oh, Tessa. As HOA president, it's my duty to ensure that all community standards are met. If you're receiving notices, it's simply because your property isn't in compliance." "With what rules exactly?" Linda's eyes gleamed with amusement. She was enjoying this. She reached for the thick binder on the table, flipping it open. "This," she said smugly, "is the presidential edition of the HOA guidelines. It includes special amendments that aren't part of the standard homeowner copy." Tessa narrowed her eyes. "So, you're saying there are rules that no one but you knows about?" Linda beamed. "Well, of course. We HOA presidents need some discretionary authority after all." Tessa couldn't believe what she was hearing. Linda had essentially created a set of secret rules that she could enforce however she pleased. This wasn't just about her pool anymore. This was about control. Linda leaned forward, her expression as sweet as ever. "Now, Tessa, I'd hate for us to get off on the wrong foot. If you'd like, I can personally review your property's compliance and help you avoid any further issues." Tessa clenched her jaw. She knew exactly what Linda was implying: submit and the harassment stops. She forced a smile. "That's very generous of you, Linda, but I think I'll handle this on my own." Linda's smile never faltered, but there was a flicker of irritation in her eyes. She didn't like it when people didn't bend to her will. Tessa turned on her heel and walked out. As she stepped onto the porch, she heard Linda call out behind her, "This neighborhood has standards, Tessa. I'd hate for you to be the reason they slip." Tessa gritted her teeth. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Tessa Robinson had dealt with difficult clients before. She had worked with high-powered executives who changed their minds every 5 minutes, investors who wanted million-dollar designs on a shoestring budget, and contractors who swore deadlines were flexible. But never in her life had she encountered someone as persistently obnoxious as Linda Crawford. At first, Tessa had assumed that, after their little confrontation, Linda would let things go. After all, she had already gotten her way in delaying Tessa's renovation for weeks with those ridiculous violation notices. Surely, that was enough of a power trip for one woman. Nope. The day construction began on her pool, Tessa noticed a familiar white BMW parked directly across the street. At 8:00 a.m. sharp, before the workers even unloaded their tools, Linda was already there, sitting in her car, sunglasses on, iPad in hand, meticulously documenting every movement. At first, Tessa laughed it off. She even joked with the construction crew about it. "She's probably just bored," she said as she watched Linda zoom in on the workers with her obnoxiously oversized camera lens. Maybe she thinks she's some kind of HOA secret agent. The workers chuckled, but by day 3, even they were getting weirded out. "She's still there," one of the guys muttered as he carried a box of tiles toward the backyard. "Does she not have a job?" "Her job is being a menace," Tessa replied. By the end of the first week, Linda hadn't missed a single day. Rain or shine, she was there watching, taking notes, taking pictures. Then came the complaints. "Your pool tiles are a threat to the neighborhood's aesthetic integrity." On Monday morning, an email popped up in Tessa's inbox. The subject line made her roll her eyes before she even clicked on it. "Urgent. Compliance violation regarding pool renovation." Sure enough, it was from Linda Crawford. "Dear Miss Robinson, it has come to my attention that the new pool tiles you are installing are not in compliance with Willow Creek Estate's traditional aesthetic guidelines. The shade of blue you have selected is inconsistent with the community's established color scheme, which favors neutral tones. Please note that any further installation of non-compliant materials may result in a formal stop work order until this matter is resolved. Regards, Linda Crawford." HOA President Tessa stared at the email in disbelief. First of all, there was no HOA rule about color palettes for pools. She had checked. Second, she had literally submitted a 3D rendering of the renovation which the board had approved. She considered drafting a carefully worded professional response, but instead, she opted for something much more satisfying. She hit reply. "Dear Linda, I appreciate your concern, but as you are aware, the HOA board has already approved my renovation plans, including the tile selection. There is no rule restricting pool colors as confirmed in the HOA guidelines. Please direct me to the specific bylaw that prohibits Mediterranean blue tiles. I'll wait. Regards, Tessa Robinson." She smirked as she hit send. By Friday, Linda was back with another obstacle. A bright red notice was taped to Tessa's front door. "Notice of temporary work stoppage per Section 4.2.3b of the HOA Compliance Handbook. All exterior renovations must undergo an additional compliance review if significant changes to materials are introduced after the initial approval. Your recent choice of tile color has triggered this additional review process. Please cease all work immediately until further notice." Tessa ripped the paper off the door. 4.2.3b. That wasn't a real rule. She had studied every page of the HOA guidelines before submitting her renovation request. That's when it hit her. She spent that weekend digging through every HOA record she could access. She logged into the homeowner's online portal and reviewed past board meeting minutes, financial reports, and violation records. She wasn't entirely sure what she was looking for, but the more she read, the more suspicious things became. Under Linda's leadership, the number of HOA fines had skyrocketed by 300% in just 6 months. Almost all violations were issued to homeowners who had challenged Linda's authority at some point. The HOA had collected thousands in compliance fees, but there was no clear record of where the money had gone. Linda wasn't just a control freak. She was running the HOA like her personal kingdom and profiting from it. Tessa compiled everything, screenshots, reports, financial inconsistencies, and sent an email to the entire HOA board. Subject: urgent. Request for emergency HOA meeting regarding financial and compliance irregularities. Dear board members, over the past several weeks, I have observed and personally experienced multiple questionable enforcement actions by HOA President Linda Crawford, including the use of secret amendments and the sudden introduction of rules that are not in any official documentation available to homeowners. I have also identified major discrepancies in the HOA's financial records, particularly in the allocation of compliance fines. I am requesting an emergency board meeting to address these concerns. The HOA's role is to serve the community, not to be used as a personal tool for intimidation and financial gain. I look forward to discussing these issues further. Regards, Tessa Robinson. Within an hour, 3 board members replied in agreement. They had no idea about the so-called secret amendments Linda kept citing. The meeting was set for the following Wednesday evening. Linda's only response to the email, a single line, "I hope you understand what you're getting yourself into, Tessa." A chill ran down Tessa's spine. It wasn't just a power trip anymore. Linda was hiding something, and Tessa was about to expose her. Tessa Robinson had been through a lot over the past few weeks: endless HOA violations, power plays, and back and forths with Linda Crawford, the self-appointed queen of Willow Creek Estates. But even she couldn't have predicted what would happen the night before the emergency HOA meeting. It started with a low, rumbling noise outside. At first, she thought it was just a garbage truck making an early morning pickup. But as the sound grew louder, something felt off. She glanced at the clock, 11:42 p.m. No one collected trash this late. Her stomach tightened as she reached for her phone and tapped into her security camera feed. The moment the image loaded, her breath caught in her throat. A cement truck, parked in her driveway. Tessa bolted from her chair, her heart pounding as she switched angles on the camera feed. There, standing in the middle of her backyard, was Linda Crawford herself. Dressed in her signature designer athleisure wear, holding a clipboard like she was conducting some kind of official city operation, Linda was directing 2 confused-looking cement workers toward the pool. Tessa barely had time to register what was happening before she heard Linda's voice, loud, authoritative, and completely full of herself. "I have full HOA authority. This is an emergency action to maintain property values. Start pouring." The workers hesitated. One of them pulled out his phone, likely trying to double-check the legality of what they were about to do. But Linda wasn't having it. She waved her clipboard in the air, stepping closer to them. "I don't care about your company's policies. I'm paying you triple your usual rate so we can do this now." Tessa could barely process the level of insanity she was witnessing. This woman was actually trying to fill her pool with cement. At that moment, Tessa's panic turned to fury. She grabbed her phone and hit the record button, capturing everything in crystal clear 4K quality. Then she heard another voice, a firm, calm, authoritative voice. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see the permits for this work." Tessa whipped her head toward the security monitor just in time to see Officer Derek Thompson, a local police officer who had been quietly observing from his patrol car across the street. The officer, a tall, no-nonsense man with sharp eyes, had apparently been monitoring the unusual midnight activity. Now he was standing near the edge of Tessa's property, watching the scene unfold with growing suspicion. Linda spun around so fast she nearly lost her balance. "Oh, officer, thank goodness you're here." Tessa rolled her eyes. Here came the performance. Linda flashed her best innocent, sugary, sweet smile, stepping forward like she was the victim. "I was just handling an emergency community maintenance issue. This pool has been deemed unsafe, so I'm following proper HOA protocol." Officer Thompson raised an eyebrow. "By filling it with cement, at midnight." One of the cement workers, clearly uncomfortable, cleared his throat. Yeah, we were also wondering about that." Linda didn't miss a beat. "Yes, officer. The HOA board has already approved this action. I have the paperwork right here." She shoved her clipboard toward him. The officer studied the document for a long, silent moment. Then, slowly, he looked back up at her. "Ma'am, this is just an HOA meeting agenda with some handwritten notes." A beat of awkward silence. The cement workers looked at each other. Linda blinked. Then she tried again. "Well, you see, officer, there's a special emergency protocol for cases like this. I was just executing my. That's not how the law works." Linda's mouth snapped shut. By this point, Tessa had made her way downstairs and stormed into the backyard. She held up her phone, still recording. "Officer, I'm the homeowner, and I definitely did not authorize this." The cement workers immediately looked relieved. One of them actually let out a low whistle and muttered, "I knew something was sketchy about this." Linda's face cycled through a rainbow of emotions: shock, rage, and finally, pure indignation. "This is private community business. You have no jurisdiction here." She actually stomped her foot. Tessa almost laughed. Officer Thompson remained unbothered. Attempting to destroy someone's property without permission, that's criminal mischief at the very least. Linda whipped back toward the workers. "If you leave now, I'll sue your company for breach of contract." The workers didn't need any more convincing. They threw their tools into the truck and practically sprinted away. Linda's expression turned desperate. She pulled out her phone and started frantically texting someone. That's when they all heard it. A loud crackling sound, a sudden pop, and then the entire neighborhood went dark. A brief, eerie silence settled over the street. Then the faint smell of burning plastic filled the air. Tessa froze. Oh. Linda had been pacing back and forth while yelling at the cement workers, and in doing so, she had stepped directly onto the temporary covering over an underground power line, which had now short-circuited, which had now knocked out the power to half the block. Officer Thompson immediately grabbed his radio. "We've got a power failure here, requesting emergency assistance." Linda, still clutching her phone, stood in stunned silence, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. Tessa just folded her arms and smiled. "Well, Linda, looks like your midnight construction project just turned into a felony." Linda's face turned ghost white. The once mighty HOA queen was suddenly nothing more than a woman caught red-handed. As more patrol cars arrived and an emergency repair crew pulled up, Tessa knew one thing for sure: tomorrow's HOA meeting was going to be very interesting. Tessa Robinson barely got a wink of sleep after the disastrous midnight cement incident. Even after the police left and the power company finished their repairs, the adrenaline was still pumping through her veins. She had just witnessed the HOA president of her neighborhood commit actual crimes in real time, but she also knew something bigger was at play. Linda's behavior had always been controlling, but what she had just attempted, that was desperation. And desperate people, they had something to hide. The next morning, Tessa checked her phone and saw that the entire neighborhood was buzzing. The group chat was on fire with messages. Did anyone else's power go out last night? Why were the police at Linda's house? Someone tell me the rumor about Linda hiring a cement truck isn't real. Tessa smirked and sent a single video to the chat, the crystal-clear security footage of Linda directing the cement workers. The messages exploded. "No way. She actually tried to cement your pool. Is this lady unhinged?" Tessa didn't respond. Instead, she grabbed her laptop, gathered every email, every HOA violation notice, every piece of evidence she had, and headed to the emergency HOA meeting. By the time she arrived at the Willow Creek Estates clubhouse, most of the HOA board members were already there, except for one. Linda. The room buzzed with tension. Homeowners sat in clusters, murmuring amongst themselves. Some shot concerned glances, others looked downright furious. At precisely 1000 a.m., HOA board member David Ramirez stood up. "All right, everyone. I'm calling this emergency meeting to order." He looked around the room, sighed, and continued. "Linda Crawford will not be joining us today. She has a prior commitment." The room erupted in murmurs. Everyone knew that was a terrible excuse. Tessa leaned forward, arms crossed. "You mean she's hiding because she got caught?" A few homeowners snickered. David rubbed his temples. "We'll get to that. But first, I need to show you all something." He took out a stack of papers and handed them around the room. Tessa grabbed one and skimmed the contents. Her stomach dropped. It was a financial report of HOA funds, and the numbers, they didn't add up. David cleared his throat. For the past 6 months, Linda has been quietly increasing violation fines. By a lot. We used to collect around $10,000 in fees per year for actual maintenance. Under Linda, that number jumped to nearly $50,000. A woman in the back gasped. David continued. "And here's the kicker. Most of that money never made it to the HOA's official account. Instead, it was being transferred into a separate, unauthorized account." Silence. Cold, shocked silence. Tessa felt a chill crawl up her spine. Linda wasn't just on a power trip. She was stealing from the entire neighborhood. A man named Mr. Hughes, who had lived in Willow Creek for 30 years, shook his head. "You mean to tell me this woman has been fining us for stupid things like mailbox color and grass height, just to steal our money?" David nodded grimly. "But it gets worse." David picked up another sheet of paper and tapped it against the table. "Linda wasn't working alone. I started digging into that separate HOA account and found regular payments made to one name, Richard Evans." Tessa felt her heart skip a beat. She knew that name. Richard Evans was a well-known real estate developer, and not the good kind. David looked around the room. For those of you who don't know, Richard Evans is notorious for buying out HOA-controlled neighborhoods, dissolving the associations, and flipping the properties into high-end developments. And that's exactly what he and Linda were trying to do here. The room erupted in outrage. So she was trying to make us all sell. That's why she was making it impossible to live here. She was driving down our property values on purpose. David nodded. Yes, Linda and Richard had a long-term plan, make life miserable for homeowners with excessive violations and absurd rules, force people to sell at low prices, buy up the properties through shell companies. Once they owned enough, dissolve the HOA completely, redevelop the neighborhood into high-end condos. The only problem, some of us weren't selling. Tessa felt her fists clench. "Like me," David nodded. "Your pool renovation was a major issue for them, Tessa. It raised the value of your property, which meant higher valuations for everyone else. That's why Linda went nuclear." By the end of the meeting, law enforcement had been officially notified. Investigators began combing through Linda's emails, bank statements, and internal HOA communications. What they found: incriminating emails between Linda and Richard, detailing their entire scam. "We need to push Robinson harder. She's refusing to comply. Make sure the violations keep stacking up. The more frustrated she is, the faster she'll want to leave. I don't care what it takes. That pool renovation can't happen." The evidence was undeniable. Linda wasn't just a bad HOA president. She was a criminal. By that evening, the news had spread like wildfire. The headline on the local news station: HOA president caught in real estate fraud scheme, Cementgate unfolds in Willow Creek Estates. Neighbors began tearing down the violation notices Linda had issued over the months. Someone even put up a homemade sign outside the clubhouse: "This HOA is under new management." And as for Linda, she had gone completely silent. But she wouldn't be able to hide for long, because Tessa had just sent all of her security footage to the district attorney's office, and they were very, very interested. The morning of Linda Crawford's downfall was unusually bright and peaceful in Willow Creek Estates. Birds chirped. The sun shone through the freshly trimmed trees. And most notably, There were no more ridiculous HOA violation notices taped to front doors. That's because Linda wasn't there to hand them out. Instead, she was being escorted out of her house in handcuffs. Tessa Robinson had barely finished her morning coffee when she got a text from her neighbor, Mrs. Chen. "Turn on the news. Channel 7. Tessa grabbed the remote and flipped the TV on. The screen filled with live footage of Linda Crawford, her pristine white tracksuit replaced with a wrinkled blouse, her hair a mess, and her signature smug smile nowhere to be found, being led down her driveway by two uniformed officers. The reporter's voice was crisp and dramatic. "Breaking news. Homeowners Association President Linda Crawford has been arrested following an investigation into financial fraud, property manipulation, and conspiracy." Tessa grinned. Linda had spent months trying to control every inch of the neighborhood, every mailbox, every blade of grass, every security camera. But now she was the one being told what to do, and she did not like it. As she was placed in the back of the patrol car, Linda tried one last time to reclaim her authority. "This is a misunderstanding. You can't do this." "I am the president of the HOA," Officer Derek Thompson, who had personally witnessed her attempt to fill Tessa's pool with cement, leaned down and responded completely deadpan, "Not anymore." And then, the doors closed and she was driven away. Within hours, the news had spread everywhere. Local headlines: HOA president's corruption exposed, homeowners take back control. Online articles: the wild story of Cementgate 2.0, how one HOA president's power trip ended in handcuffs. Neighborhood group chats: "Suo, should we put a plaque at Tessa's pool?" HOA Karen finally got what she deserved. "I just realized I've been paying extra HOA fees for nothing." And of course, the HOA board was in full damage control mode. After Linda's arrest, an emergency homeowners vote was held. This time, no fake secret amendments, no intimidation tactics, just actual democracy. The result: new HOA rules required all regulations to be approved by a homeowner-elected committee. Financial transparency became mandatory. Every dollar spent by the HOA had to be publicly documented. Unreasonable fines were eliminated. No more grass too tall nonsense. And most importantly, no single person would ever have the kind of unchecked power Linda had abused. With Linda gone, the neighborhood finally started feeling like a community again. And Tessa's pool renovation: it was unanimously approved. A month later, Tessa stood on her new pool deck, looking at the gorgeous Mediterranean blue tiles that had somehow caused an entire crime ring to unravel. The pool was finally finished. And to celebrate, she threw a massive pool party for the entire neighborhood. People laughed, splashed in the water, grilled burgers, and toasted to a future without HOA tyranny. And right next to the pool, a small plaque had been installed. "This pool survived cement, corruption, and HOA Karen." Tessa smirked every time she saw it. It was the perfect reminder of how ridiculous this whole thing had been and how sweet victory tasted. As for Linda, prison life wasn't treating her well. Apparently, the other inmates weren't too fond of self-appointed rule enforcers. According to Officer Thompson, who got updates from his cop buddies, Linda had tried to start an inmate advisory committee. Her first order of business: "We need to establish a proper color code for prison uniforms." The reaction: laughter. Endless, merciless laughter. Her fellow inmates quickly gave her a new nickname: Prison HOA Karen. And unlike Willow Creek Estates, she wasn't in charge of this community. Months later, on a peaceful afternoon, Tessa relaxed by her pool, sipping lemonade, enjoying the quiet. No HOA notices. No one spying from across the street. No one threatening to bury her backyard in concrete. Just peace. She knew that there would always be more Linda Crawfords out there, people who loved power for the sake of control. But now she knew how to fight back, because the best revenge wasn't just beating them, it was fixing the system so no one like them could ever rise again. And of course, knowing that if another HOA Karen ever tried something, her security cameras were always recording,